here I am, decades later, and it took this long for me to really be able to stand taller than I ever have as an artist and as a singer-songwriter myself. And I finally know, my own identity. I know how my mother and I are extremely different as songwriters. And but it took a long, long time. And I guess I would say to anybody out there who has had that experience that I had of having that sort of the main person in the family unit is not you who's the star. It's a thing. It's a thing I had to explore in therapy and work with and work on the habits that come from that, about always kind of deferring to somebody else or sort of making oneself a little bit smaller so someone else can shine a little bit brighter.
Hello, Susannah. So lovely to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
It's so lovely to talk to you. I've read a little bit about your life, about your work, and I was so excited to also know about or read about your mum being also a singer-songwriter and also had a very successful career.
Yes, yes. Yes, my mother was Carol Hall, who passed away 8 years ago. But she was an extraordinary talent. She was originally from a small town in Texas, in West Texas, Abilene. And she's one of those people who knew what she wanted to do right away when she was very, very young. And she always wanted to be a writer. And then she really knew early that she wanted to write for Broadway. And she did. She ended up going to New York, despite a lot of parental attempts to keep her in the South. And she got to New York City and really made her way. She had me and my brother. She was a single mom. My folks divorced very early into their marriage. And so when I was growing up, she was writing, Saturday morning commercials for toys and cereals and things like
Wow.
that. And just doing a lot of what they call spec work, when you don't get paid and you're just creating and writing and hoping that it'll work out. And so she had many shows, and eventually had her biggest success, which was called The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, which ran on Broadway for almost 5 years, had many, many
Mhm.
tours, international productions, multiple tours in the United States, and then became a movie with Dolly Parton.
I saw
So that
that's
was,
why I saw the movie. So when I read,
yeah,
I didn't see the musical, but the
the
movie I
show.
did, you know.
Yeah, the movie is fun and kind of campy, I guess. It's kind of very well known in I think the gay community, because the
Okay.
men, were just really gorgeous at the time, and they were dancing in, jeans and cowboy boots and hats. And so it was kind of something that hadn't really been seen before. But, truthfully, the show itself I hope it will have a revival. There's a pretty good chance that it will have a
Really?
Broadway revival in the next few years. I really hope so, because it's extremely relevant to today's climate. It's kind of extraordinary. It's about hypocrisy, number one, and particularly the religious right in this country, the very conservative minded kind of church values that are put upon other people, but not necessarily those in power.
Oh,
Kind of
okay.
hard to explain without giving
Mm.
away secrets, but it it's a wonderful show, and I was just extremely, proud and blessed to have a mother like that. Before she became a Broadway songwriter, she was actually she had a record deal in the '70s with Elektra Records as a
Really?
singer-songwriter. She was out touring with artists like Don McLean on his American Pie tour, and Loggins and Messina, and Chris Christopherson, and just some really wonderful people. And it wasn't really her milieu. It's not what she exactly wanted to do, because she was just a woman going out there with her piano and singing to these huge crowds. And her songs were actually very theatrical. They were very much kind of character songs. You know, she liked to write
Mm.
in a theatrical way. And but anyway, so she had that part of her career before she became the Broadway success. So, you know, truthfully, when I was growing up in New York City, I did sing. I loved to sing, but I was very much like my mom's backup singer. She was not a mom who like pushed me and my brother in any way.
Mm.
She had been
Mm.
pushed into music, and so she didn't push us. And you know, it was a situation where I think a lot of people can relate in some way or another when you have a parent or even a sibling who's kind of the star of the family, you know, and that person's schedule and that person's, you know, pursuit takes kind of center stage.
Oh, yeah.
That's what was going on, and that's not a bad thing, but
Mm.
that's what was happening. And so I just thought, well, my mom does the music. I'm not going near that. You know, it was
Really?
just, yeah, it was kind of
Mm.
intimidating and just, I just felt like, oh, that's her thing. And I was completely dead set on becoming an actress and only an actress from a very young age, from when I was 9. And so the music was just a huge surprise that came in my 30s, believe it or not. So
But
that's
amazing that because I can imagine in that time, like you say, when she went to New York, her parents must have been a little bit worried or not so happy about her leaving. And so all these things that she did is actually also for that time was quite groundbreaking, I think.
absolutely, absolutely. And yes, she was a woman who was writing music and lyrics to get, you know,
Mm.
alone, which was very uncommon. I think, I don't know the exact stat, but I think she was, you know, one of maybe two, literally two or three at the most, women who wrote both music and lyrics for a Broadway show.
Really? Mm.
Um, at the time. And she told me about, you know, meeting with certain um, idols of hers, you know, older men who had written for Broadway for years. And she would have a meeting with them and be so excited. And she'd sit down at the piano and they would kind of sit next to her on the bench and put their hand on her knee. And she was like, uh-oh, wait a
Mm.
second. And, you know, it just, yeah, there was a tremendous amount of sexism at the time. And I went to a very progressive school in the 70s in New York City, and it was extremely woke. And I'm proud of that background. But at the time, you know, it was racism and sexism were presented to me as a child as being, you know, very equal in terms of things to be aware of that weren't necessarily being spoken about or looked at or acknowledged in our
Mm.
society. And yeah, so much sexism. And yeah, and being a single mom, she had some help from from her family regarding me and my brother, like our education was covered, but otherwise she was really doing it on her own. And yeah, I just have huge respect for her. Another project she did that I love is something that some people know and some people don't, but it was very successful. A project called Free to Be You and Me in the 70s, which was spearheaded by Marlo Thomas at the time, who was a big TV star. It had Michael Jackson in it and Harry Belafonte and Diana Ross and Mel Brooks. And it was really this incredible project that was about gender roles, to tell you the truth. It's still, again, relevant today because it was dealing with themes of, you know, the differences between boys and girls and how girls are allowed to win the races and boys are allowed to play with dolls or cry. And so my mother wrote 3 songs on that album that won a Peabody Award and won multiple Grammys. And so she was the most proud of that because it was for children and it was really groundbreaking.
Amazing. So
Yeah.
you really had the example of what it is like to be a musician or an artist, and all the challenges you know that you had to overcome or had to deal with,
Yes.
and also the work ethic.
Yes, yes,
Mhm.
I did up close and personal. And my father too. My dad was is still alive, retired now, but was a fashion photographer, and he also was working for free all the time, working on his portfolio, working on his book that he would show to people to try to get jobs. So, the weekends he was working. My mother was working all the time. There were my mother, I mean, the average time for a Broadway show to be kind of in development, I believe this is still true, is, 5 to 7 years minimum. Like people start working on shows years before they actually open on Broadway or off Broadway. And it's a certain kind of life that I just saw and I thought that was pretty normal. So I grew up and have been lucky enough to be able to sort of have my own version of that, but not going to an office, being on your own schedule, but having to figure out how to be self-disciplined enough to, produce things and being able to deal with massive amounts of rejection, creating something when no one is asking you to and nobody cares, and so there's that personal sense of having some sort of mission or really needing to do this. I saw my mom and dad doing that, and my mom having tremendous success and failures, right after she had Whorehouse, which was such a big success. A couple, years later, there was a sequel to The Best Little Whorehouse that was on Broadway that I actually was in. I had a small part,
Really?
not necessarily in the show. I was in the orchestra pit singing because they needed extra voices. It's a very, it's kind of a Broadway secret. Not a lot of people know that there are what they call pit singers, like in the orchestra pit. And if there happens to be a show with a lot of dancers, dancers are amazing, but sometimes it's hard to find people who sing and dance.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, most Broadway people can do that, but sometimes you need a little bit more vocals if there's a lot of dancers or whatever. So there were three of us singers in the pit. And so that's what I did. And then I ended up, the director chose me and one of the other pit singers to do a little like lounge act in the lobby before the show. So I wasn't on the stage, but I
Oh,
was
okay.
underneath the
But
stage and
amazing. Yeah.
it was great. I had a blast and I loved working with my mother that closely, but it got completely slammed. I mean, it was just a huge flop and there
Really?
was a lot of money poured into it and it did not succeed. And it was my mother's name in the paper and she was devastated. I mean, she took to her bed. Like she just was so incapacitated, truthfully, from that. It was really hard to watch sometimes. And I definitely, I know that my mother didn't push me into show business because she didn't want me to experience that kind of pain. She used to let me skip school in high school and come to the auditions for the tours of Best Little Whorehouse in Texas that were taking place, just so she could say, look at all these incredibly talented people who come in and don't get the part. Like, and it has nothing to do with the fact that they're not talented. It's just there's only so many parts, and she tried
Exactly.
to, discourage me that way, but it just made me more determined. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I spoke to the um, artistic director of the, it's now difficult to explain, but in Vienna, we have also where they, I can't remember now what the company is called, but they do German musical. They do take the musicals and translate it to German, and then they, perform it in German.
Hmm.
And he spoke about also this thing where it's sometimes just the height, it's sometimes just that
Oh, yes,
look, that is that the director wants. And it's not that you're not talented or that it's just not for that role that they,
absolutely.
so
Yeah,
it's,
yeah. I
yeah,
mean, you're not supposed to take it personally, but of course, how can you personally? Because it's
yeah,
you. It's not
exactly.
like you're coming in and you don't have
Mm,
yeah, a resume with a certain company on it or some kind of letter of recommendation. And yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly tough business,
yeah.
but yeah.
But,
But yes, okay. I mean,
mhm.
I'll just say the way that, even this interview started, I mean, for years and years and years, my mother was the most interesting thing about me. That's what it felt like, for many, many years. And even my beloved best friend, used to just love going to parties or restaurants or whatever, where he would say, "Do you know who her mother is?" And
Oh,
it was this
really?
thing that, oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Mhm.
so that also kind of became a certain kind of an albatross, right? I mean, just something that was, I think that's the right word. I'm trying to remember what exactly the meaning of albatross is, but just something that was, just over my head in a certain way. And
Mhm.
when I started, I literally like avoided singing for about 10 years, from when I was about 16, 17 to like 20, 27. And then I was quitting cigarettes. And I went to this program. I had tried to quit cigarettes for so long. I'd smoked for about 10 years. And they said, I went to this like behavioral modification program. And they said, what are you going to substitute smoking with? You smoke cigarettes. You have to substitute something else. And I thought, okay, I guess, well, maybe singing, because singing actually is wonderful for quitting smoking cigarettes, if anyone's listening, because it mimics what cigarettes are feel so good, like taking a big inhale
Oh,
and
yes.
a big exhale. I mean, that's
Yeah.
exactly what you do in singing. So I went back to singing, and the minute I opened that door in my life again, I started waking up in the middle of the night with like lyrics going through my head and melodies, and I couldn't really deny that like there were songs wanting to come through me. I couldn't deny that that was happening, and I was so scared. I had to tell my mother like, I think there might be. I'm thinking of some songs, and she was very encouraging and sweet about it. Uh, but it was late. I mean, it was like 27, 28, and I'm thinking, wait, what? I thought I was going to be just doing acting. And it was confusing and extremely nerve-wracking, because I just thought, oh my gosh, now everyone's just going to compare me to her. Like, because how could they not? And it just took a number of years. I mean, I look at myself in my Zoom here. I am a youthful 61. I'm not a young person anymore. I am 61, and so here I am. Decades later, and it took this long for me to really be able to stand taller than I ever have as an artist and as a singer-songwriter myself. And I finally know, my own identity. I know how my mother and I are extremely different as songwriters. And but it took a long, long time. And I guess I would say to anybody out there who has had that experience that I had, of having that sort of the main person in the family unit is not you,
Mhm.
who's the star. It's a thing. It's a thing I had to explore in therapy and work with and work on the habits that come from that, about always kind of deferring to somebody else, or sort of making oneself a little bit smaller so someone else can shine a little bit brighter. And my mother adored me and was very, very generous and supportive in so many ways. But it just, just the way that it worked out. Uh,
Well,
it's not
I
her fault,
have
but
to,
I had to work through quite a lot of that.
yeah, I have to say that while you were talking now, I was thinking, I never thought of that when we started speaking. I actually thought that, by the way, I'm also 61, so I know what you
All
mean.
right.
And
Well, you look fabulous too. You
thank
look
you.
fabulous.
But I also started very late in my life doing what I really, love to do. But coming back to your mum, I actually, while you were talking about your mum and telling all this, all I was thinking was how amazing that you actually had, where some people have to go to a music school and they have to say, oh, I've been to or a ballet school. So I've been to the Royal Ballet School, and that's where I got my training. You actually have this person who you are genetically connected to, and 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 this was your schooling, or this was your the experiences that you had, and also that you inherited this from her. So what an
Yes.
amazing what amazing thing, really, that you had that. And I can understand that it might feel that way to you, but I think from the outside, it looks quite different. It looks like, wow, how fortunate that you had that experience, and that you could learn firsthand from her. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and please
Mhm.
don't misunderstand me. I would never say that it wasn't a blessing. It
Yeah.
was tremendous. It was a fantastic childhood. New York City is a great place to grow up because it fosters incredible independence because it's a
Mhm.
walking city and there's subways and buses. And so, when I was quite young, I was getting myself all around. And if I had a lesson somewhere or whatever, and I was going to acting classes, starting at 9, I would walk there or I would get myself
Mhm.
there. So home from school. I raised my son in Los Angeles and my daughter, and I was driving them everywhere.
Oh,
I was
really?
just like, oh my God, my
Yeah.
mother never drove me anywhere. This is insane. It takes so long.
Mm.
And so absolutely, it was wonderful, and it was a sort of a schooling, and yet observing someone is really different than learning on your own. And like I said, my mother, we all do things as parents, I think, that we're trying to perhaps make up for what we didn't get or what we think, we
Exactly.
could have
Yeah.
used more of, and so my mom had been raised by a very unstable woman. My grandmother, alcoholic, very, very not a healthy person, quite frustrated herself probably as an artist. She was a talented musician. My grandmother was a violinist and a pianist. And yeah, music goes back on both sides of my mother's family quite far. My mother's father's family were I ended up finding this out on ancestry.com. They were song sellers. So my great 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 grandfather would go from town to town in the South and sell sheet music, which was the only way to get it out because there was no radio. It's kind of crazy to think about. But that's the way that people heard new songs is like the song guy came into town and said, here, check out this new song. And
Wow.
so, and then his son opened a music store. And then in that music store, my grandparents met and on and on. So, but my mother was quite pushed by like kind of a stage mother type. So she really backed off and didn't push me and my brother at all. But that means I didn't get any musical like
Oh, I see.
basis
Yeah.
at all. And I, by the time I was 13, I was like, geez, I guess I should play piano. But by the time you're 13, you don't want to be a beginner. Like you feel too old. You're like, this is terrible. I'm not good. I don't want to do this. I want to do things I'm good at. And so it created a challenge for me because ultimately I was quite untrained and I'm very much instinctive. I'm by ear. I don't really read music. I took piano in my 30s enough that I learned chords and I learned how to write a song, on the piano. But I still don't do that. I kind of let it go after a while and just realized I'm really not a player. And I kind of wish I were, but here we are. But I eventually started saying, well, I play the voice, but
Yeah.
it sort of just, it took me, that became another challenge for me to find a way to appreciate my own talents, even if they don't fit into the boxes of, wow, she went to such and such a music school, or, she's a great sight reader, or things like that.
But it's so interesting that only I think last week or the week before, I spoke to the founder of Shabby Chic. Do you know the Shabby
Yes,
Chic?
I saw.
Yeah,
Yes, I watched that episode when I was
yeah. And
doing my
she
homework.
also she also talked about um, her parents. Her mum was a doll. She repaired dolls and teddy bears, and her dad was a sort of a flea market furniture salesman, and how that also influenced her. But I actually asked her about her children, and it's also different stories. And I think it's like that. It was with me, the situation. I wanted to study drama, and my mum didn't think it was a good idea. Yet with my children, the moment they started showing interest in dance, I went all for it, and I said, well, go for
Yes.
it, do it,
Right. Of
try it,
course.
and if you want to do it. And
Yes.
people would say to me, oh, they won't have a long career in dance, and it's not a sustainable career. And then I just thought, so what, let
Right.
them do it and try. So I think it's true what you're saying. It's like, what you had, what you didn't have, you try with your children to give it to them, and vice versa. I think that's how
Hmm.
we go through generations.
I think that's true. Yeah. I mean,
Mm,
hopefully, with
yeah.
awareness, that doesn't always come to everyone just naturally. Sometimes it takes a little extra work or thoughtfulness or
Mm.
therapy or whatever it is. But yeah, I spent I mean, after I realized, oh, I think I want to do more music when I was about 27, I met my husband shortly after that. And eventually got married a little bit after that, and ended up having a child, a biological child, and then raised him all as an only child for quite a while until well, the plan had always been to adopt a second child, and so then we did foster care, trying to
Oh,
adopt through the
wow.
foster care system in the
Mm.
States, and that did not work out, which is part of that process. Often children are returned to their parents. Um, and so we had a sweet little boy with us for a year who was 3, who we all fell madly in love with. And then he went back to his parents. So that was just a big heartbreak. The good news is he's still our godson. He's in our
Oh,
life. His
wow.
parents are in
That's
our life, and
amazing.
he's going off to college. So we're thrilled. But then later, after that, we ended up adopting our daughter from Colombia, and did that when she was an older teen. So she was 15 at the time, and it was, that was extremely challenging. So I spent a couple of decades being a mom, and a different kind of mom in all different ways, to 3 different kids, 2 of whom I call, my own. And so that, yeah, I think that's an extra challenge of being a woman. And I remember my mother talking about that as well. I mean, she had a songbook at one point that Elektra Records put out between her first and her second album, and in it they had excerpts of different interviews that she'd given, and I mean, I see it because it's in the page. She's talking about, the challenges of being a mother. And she says, yeah, it's really hard. I love being a family with them. And she said, but, this morning, my daughter, I had to get up early and go to a school assembly because my daughter was doing a square dance. That was me. And she says in the thing, and I didn't really want to go, but I had to get up and I had to do it. Or she missed a lot of industry parties and places where she should have been schmoozing and partying with the producers. And she was like tucking us in, and at home. So she acknowledged openly that absolutely being a mother affected her career. And as a kid, knowing that, I remember feeling a little bit bad about that.
Yes.
But, then I
Oh.
found myself years later going, no, this is part of being a
Mm.
woman that doesn't necessarily happen to men as frequently.
Mm. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And do you find that these experiences of motherhood, that you also, that you express that through your music, that's also a message through your music?
That's an excellent question. Hmm. I I don't know. I think the real seed of my music comes from a yearning to comfort. And I
Okay.
got to be honest, to comfort myself, number one. I think
Mm.
it's probably a result of the fact that one of the things that I carry with me as the daughter of a songwriter, and my brother does too, is that our mother's songs, which we heard a million times, um, were and are like comfort
Oh,
things to us. Like,
beautiful.
just for
Mm.
years and years and years, if I felt sad, I would just, sing her songs, because when before I had my own particularly. And then when I started writing for songs, I noticed that it was a comfort for me to sing them. And oftentimes they are themed in ways that comfort me, that have to do with, encouraging myself, you're going to get through this. Or
Oh, yeah.
I write a lot about interior kind of awareness of, let's say, I've written two songs about having a kind of a negative voice in my head that's very destructive and not encouraging, and how to deal with that. And so I think that I never really thought of the songs being things for my children, even. I really have thought of them more as comfort for me and listeners in general. But I guess having been the child of an artist and having had to sit through like so many, watching my mother, she was a performer. She was quite a performer. And so, every single dinner party we ever went to, every dinner party she hosted, she was just always like, now she's going to sit down at the piano and play a few songs. And so I sat through so many of those. I really don't expect my kids to. I don't want them to feel like they have to. I don't need them to personally. And but recently, when I was actually doing a cover, I was recording a cover of a song by a band called the Black Keys, who I love. And the song is beautiful, and it's called Everlasting Light. And the refrain that you repeat over and over is, "Let me be your everlasting light." And it's just great. It's just a great song. And the reason I is just because it's one of those songs I just always loved to sing to myself. And so I did my own version. And when I was performing it in the recording studio, I was thinking a lot about my kids, because I was thinking about that idea of eternal, what's eternal, when I'm gone, let me still be a voice in your head that you hear, that is mine and that encourages you. Or the great thing about my mother's work is that it's a piece of immortality. She left all these incredible songs. And when I sing them, I'm connected to her. I've recorded two of her songs, one from The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas and one from that gender 70s kids album called Free to Be You and Me. And actually, I just recorded a third song of hers I haven't released yet from one of her Electra albums in the 70s. But every time I do that, I really get into who my mother was. And it brings me great joy that she left those things. And the idea that I could maybe leave a couple of
Yes.
melodic tidbits on
Mm.
the earth after I'm gone is meaningful, especially as I get older.
Mm. And it's so amazing for me because I mean, um, the last few months, I was in many conversations where we talked about age, and sort of 61 now is almost like 41, years ago. It's I think,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
not long time ago. If I think when my mum turned 61, she was much older than, or her ways were much older than I would think I am now. And
Yes.
I think our lives changed so much, and I think we can still do so much. And I think it's wonderful that you do this and that you still write songs and put yourself out there as a singer songwriter, and showing also, I think, for a younger generation to see what is possible still, and how many reinventions one person can have, that you don't have to worry about, I have to now decide on doing, when I'm 20, I have to decide on doing this thing because I have to do it for the rest of my life. You can reinvent yourself. You can do different things. You can have different careers in your
Hmm.
lifetime.
Yes, I absolutely. I mean, I think it's very inspiring in so many ways. The way that the perception of age has changed. I giggled because when, 61 is the new 41, except for the body, except for the
Exactly.
body.
Yeah.
There's this unfortunate reality that the body starts kind of breaking down. It's like you're driving an
Yeah.
older car, and it's like, oh, um, and that's just part of it, and that is it's a little upsetting. It's a little disquieting,
Yeah.
but it's interesting. I mean, I definitely have reinvented myself, but I think I don't really think of where I am now as such a reinvention as much as truly like a little bit of a late bloomer's bloom.
I
It
hear
just
you.
really
Yeah.
took me this long. I mean, I spent over a decade in Hollywood writing scripts because I kind of have always followed where the flow is taking me. And so I was a screenwriter for over a decade and writing things that did involve music and stories that were for younger people, family type stories. And it was like trying to put a square peg in a round hole. I mean, I just, every single time I had a meeting, I was just like, wow, this is just not feeling good. Like, this is so frustrating. And one of the great things about music is it's incredibly, it's quick. I mean, for me, it's quick. And it's so I can create a song, I can write a song, even record it, all that stuff in like a couple of days or a week, or,
Mm,
it's
mm,
very fast. A screenplay takes years, a musical takes years. There's tons of people involved, and music is so just satisfying for me because, sometimes I'm just impatient and I want something right away. But I feel like it's important to me to have as part of my identity, my brand as an artist. I mean, I'm saying it out loud. I'm an indie artist and I'm 61. That's, first of all, that's not something
amazing. I love
you're going
it.
to hear too often. And it's really like I'm writing the best things that I've written now. I have the band I've ever had. I did work with wonderful, talented people, before the guys who I'm working with now. But the guys who I'm working with now are of a certain caliber of experience where they just, and it's a thing, like with the collaboration is just hitting sweet spots. I had two guys in my band come over yesterday and we're working on this show I'm going to do in 2 weeks, and it was just so great. And we were like changing the keys of songs, and at one point laughing because there's a song I recorded not too long ago. I mean, within the last year, and I released it, but it just wasn't really, it hasn't been connecting with audiences in a way that I wanted it to. It's called I Don't Want to Know. And it's about basically the world right now, like just saying, like, I don't tell me the headline today. I don't want to know. I can't do it today. I had felt very funny about writing a song that was about sort of denial and not wanting to know, but I actually think it's a really important part of our reality with social media and everything. We have to take breaks. We can't be expected to absorb all of this and
Exactly.
never
Yeah.
ever, close
Mm.
our ears. So that was the song. But anyway, when the guys came over, we realized, you know what? It sounds so much better, like a whole step lower than the way I recorded it, and much lower in my voice. It really sounds great, and it was like, oh wow. And I was laughing because these guys have performed with and worked with, Alanis Morissette, John Mayer, Macy Gray, and all these wonderful artists who I love. And they were saying, yeah, it's funny. Sometimes you realize, you record the song and then you take it out on the road and you realize it sounds way better in that other key. And my bassist was saying, in the 70s, he said back in the day, bands used to be on the road and playing the songs over and over, and then they would go in the studio. And then the producer might say, "Oh, you know what? Let's do that in a different
Mm.
key." And he said, "But now it's completely opposite. You do a song, you go, oh, that feels good. You record it, and then you take it out live, and you realize, oh, you know what? I think it sounds better lower." And it was just really interesting to me that we found
Yeah,
that
it's
out.
yeah, and things have changed in that way, and also in the music business.
Oh yeah.
So it's wonderful to think you working with artists who have that experience, and that can take or take that advice from them.
Yeah, they're the greatest guys. It's just such a joyful collaboration. There's no egos. There's nobody getting, their feathers ruffled that somebody said something to them, and it's just the, excuse me, the easiest, most just pleasurable collaboration I've ever had in my life. I've really, really enjoyed it. I love recording. I just love it so much. I really do love performing also. it's kind of my version of riding roller coasters.
Oh,
And I
really?
don't like riding roller coasters, by the way, but it's kind of my version of that, that I go on these rides of performing and I set the date and I'm excited. And then the minute I set the date, I'm like, oh God, what am I doing? And it's
Mm.
sort of like as if you're going up a hill on a roller coaster the whole time. Like I'm in countdown mode right now. I have less than 2 weeks, 13 days, and I start just feeling really nervous and weird. But then, I get there and I have a blast. So I kind of know that's
Mm.
part of my process. But
And you're always performing with a band.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
I wish I were a person who would go out with a guitar or piano, but I'm not, like I said.
But
So
I
at least
think
I got to
isn't
have one guy.
yeah, but it's I think it's amazing because it's that um not just support, but that collaboration, and that energy that you have then on stage.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. It's
Mm.
great. And the thing I'm doing more of, and I'm doing it today actually, I have a 2 hour session with a movement coach who's really helping me do something I've always wanted to do, which is dance more.
Really?
I've not trained as a dancer at all, never took dance as a kid, because I was doing the acting classes so here I am, 61, a little bit stiffer than
Amazing.
I would have been if I'd started 30 years ago. But, I figure, well, what the heck? Like, better get out there now or never, And so I am doing more like movement and my stuff, my music always has a groove. I wouldn't say it's like dance music in terms of like a club thing, but it definitely, every song of mine, it has like a toe tapping. You're going to be like in your seat, you start moving your shoulders a little bit. I love music like that. I'm not really a ballad girl.
Oh, okay.
Even if I have
Mm.
slow grooves, I love grooves. And so I'm letting myself do some more funky moves or figuring out ways to move if I'm at a mic or holding a mic. And I'm doing that. And that has to do with very much with a song that I wrote that I released last year, which was the first part of this. My second album has been being released single by single because that's what indie artists do to take advantage of Spotify. And so I've released about 5 songs last year, and then this year in 2026 is about 4 or 5 more. And then in the fall, it'll all add up to my second album. My first album was called POV, which is this is all
Okay.
on Spotify and all the streaming
Mm.
platforms, and YouTube. But there's a song I wrote last year called Always Wanted To. And it's a really different sounding song than a lot of my songs. I wrote it on ukulele, which I don't play extremely well, but I play enough chords on ukulele that I wrote this song. And the first line of the song is, I always wanted to play ukulele.
Oh, really?
And yes, and it's very much about, I always wanted to do this thing.
Mm.
And life doesn't last forever, right? So,
True.
like, find the things that make you smile or make you laugh and do them. And, really like think about what have you always wanted to do. And I think that's a great message for older people. And yet I also think, younger people too. It's important to hear that and remember because we get into that mode especially in the United States, of being in such a sort of a survival economy, work, 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 work type of mindset that I think it's important to think about what are those things that bring us joy, and how about maybe you go try it, go do it
Exactly.
now.
And
And
yeah,
because I think it's important just for the health of our world. I just don't think we can expect societal change or peace or anything, empathy for others, if we are not connected to our own self-care, our own love, our own joy.
yeah, that's true. And also, uh, people sometimes work until they retire and then stop. They work for retirement and stop. And then you think there's so much more you can do. And it's amazing to think, like I said before, we are still able to do so much, at our age that why not? Why not do
Yeah,
it? Mm.
absolutely. And we have wisdom. I mean, I do think it's
Yeah,
important to
absolutely.
think about, the role of elders, even though I don't want to be called elderly, um, you know, in many societies, not so
Mm.
much our American one, but perhaps there are cracks in that system as well. That elder people, elders are considered, the people who have the wisdom, who have the learning, who
Exactly.
have the
Yeah.
experience, and
Mm.
it's
And
um,
I
and who
think
have a
also,
connection to history, to tell you the truth. Like there's a lot of
mm,
history erasing going on
mm,
in my country right now. And so those people, those of us who were raised in other times where people were fighting for civil rights and fighting for women's rights and fighting, and that we're still fighting those fights 50 years later, 60 years later, that's really important to
yeah.
to speak up about, I
Mm.
think.
And I think, yeah, that, for us also, when we do something at this age, it's also with a different energy, I think. When you're younger, you are so aware of, am I doing the right thing? Who's looking? Is it going to be a success? Where I think you get to a stage also where you think, well, I want to do it. I'm putting it out there. And, you know, if you don't like it, then don't listen. So
That's right.
that's sort of
Absolutely.
thing that almost inner peace that you have, that this is what I'm
Yes.
creating. It's not for
Yes.
everybody, but that's also okay.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, I mean that urge to please is
Mm.
something I had for, so many years. I can't say I don't have it anymore, but I have a lot less of it because I think there's an awareness of time going by and like, but also, I mean, it makes me think of a song I wrote on my very first full length album. Because I mean, all through the time when I was married and with kids and stuff, I was putting out albums, little albums. They weren't little, but they felt little. They were CDs, well, EPs. I mean, I put out a couple of albums. I mean, I don't know how many, I mean, 5 or 6 like EPs and full length albums, and my husband was really wonderful and supportive about letting me use some of our funds to do that. But at the time, there's no streaming. So I was like, what do I do with this thing? I have a CD or I have a cassette tape, is what I started with, but CDs, and I'd be like, I kind of joke about it now, but it's true. I would go to like little league, baseball games with my son, or the school parent night where you're meeting all the teachers, and I'd have my CDs in my purse, just in case somebody said like, so what do you do, Susannah? And I'd be like, woo, I'm a
Yeah.
stay-at-home mom, but here you go, listen to this on the way home. But there really wasn't any way to share it. And
Mm.
so for me, the timing of sharing my art has really worked out with being older. But I was going to say one of the songs that was on my very first album was called Somebody Somewhere. And it was really about just like, there's always somebody somewhere who's going to be upset, who doesn't like it, who doesn't think this, who does, always, no matter what you do. Because I'm the daughter of a Southern hostess, very good girl. And I have a lot of good girl traits, following the rules and all that. And you know what? It doesn't really always matter. And like people
Exactly.
don't
Yeah.
follow the rules and it works out great for them. And maybe letting go of that, especially again as women, we are so like encouraged so much more than men to be good and to do the right, do be nice and don't upset people. And ultimately, it's like, well, guess what? They get upset anyway.
Yeah,
I remember
exactly. Yeah.
they get upset because you're too nice. You can't win. I mean, there
Yeah.
is a part of life in that way. If you're so,
Mm.
um, you know, dependent or concerned with what everybody else thinks, you're going to realize at a certain point, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's so true.
Can you tell
But
I've had a little bit of
I
coffee and no breakfast? I'm
yeah.
like, oh, I'm feeling my caffeine here.
But listen, Susannah, this is so great. You're such an inspiration. I love what you do, and I also listen to some of your music. I love it, and I think really you're such an example for many people who think, I'm too old, or I can't. But yes, you can. So
Yes, yes, yes.
it's amazing.
Well,
But
thank you. I mean, if you'll, may I have a moment to do my little like self promo thing? I want to make
yes,
sure.
go for it.
You
Go for
probably
it.
have it on your website, but yeah, I just want to say to all the listeners out there, first of all, thank you for listening to us
Mm.
talk. And I would love for you to check out my music because part of my passion has to do with singing along and the benefits of singing
Oh,
as a
yeah.
group. It's a very connecting type of thing, any kind of choir or singing together with the family or around the campfire or whatever. But I also really am into the fact that if you're in a bad mood and you sing a song, in 3 minutes you can actually
Mm.
sort of change your mood, and if you sing it again you'll start to feel the difference. I'm very big into singing in the car, singing in the shower, and I my songs, not always, but often I think about certain songs. I'm thinking about the listeners and like, what, could they sing along with this chorus? Is this chorus easy enough to sing along to? Because I have a commitment, really. It's just who I am. I feel all the pain. I'm an extremely sensitive person, deeply empathic, and yet I am very much committed to finding the joy, finding the love, letting go, accepting what is, all those therapy type things. And my songs, it is my intention, and I think you'll feel it, that the songs are soothing and comforting and uplifting and healing. Like they're good vibe songs. So check them out. And my name, Susannah B. It's spelled like how in the Bible, Susannah, and then just a big B, no period. And I'm on all the streaming platforms, and Instagram, it's at Susannah B Music. And I would just love you to check it out. Yeah, there's all sorts of different kinds of feeling songs, but mostly it's like groovy indie pop rock, like Sheryl Crow meets Bonnie Raitt meets, I don't know, somebody else.
But I'm just thinking now, I just recently spoke to a choir facilitator, and he does these one. Now there's a term for it, but I forgot what it is. But it's just a choir for one night, and
Mm,
they come together, group of people. You don't have to have
Pop up.
any.
Is it a pop up
Uh,
choir?
no, it's something like that, but he has a
Right.
specific name for it.
Okay.
Um, and and then they sing for 3 hours. They sing. Now I'm thinking your songs might be just perfect for one of those choirs.
Oh,
You want
well,
if you want them
you
people
know,
to sing along.
thank you. There's one I can think of, and actually, I was recently on a different podcast, and the guy, the whole podcast has to do with, I don't know, choosing songs and listening to them, and so the guy had chosen a song of mine from a couple, like from years back,
Mm,
which I was like very surprised that he chose one of the four songs he liked best as this song, and it's called "I Am Here," and it's not a normal song because it's a chant. And I did
interesting.
specifically, like, it kind of came through. Sometimes there's a very magical, mystical kind of feeling to writing songs. Sometimes it's work, and you have to kind of coax it out as a writer would, as a poet might. You just start writing and honing it and rewriting. I do a lot of rewriting and crafting. I'm not a person who thinks it's finished, when you just
Really.
finish the first time. But this particular song, I Am Here, really came through at a time when I was taking a workshop and I was in a very meditative environment. And it was like someone was whispering in my ear. When I say it came through, it was like that. It just came through completely, like, sort of finished. And it's a melody that I was thinking a lot about people singing along to. And the guy on the podcast who responded to it said he just been playing it on repeat in his car. And and
Mm,
it really, I guess it's a song. Like I said, it's a chant. It's not,
mm.
there's no bridge, there's no second verse. It doesn't really move the same way that most of the songs that I write do. And it's kind of about inner acceptance of, like, right where I am right now is the perfect place to be. That's where I am. And so I think
Love
that
it.
one might work for a choir.
Yeah,
Other
yeah,
songs might be the
definitely.
heart. Yeah, no, I'm a huge, huge proponent of choirs,
Mm.
groups, any kind of singing. For about 20 years in Los Angeles, I was a member of a non-auditioned a cappella community choir.
I
And
love
we
it.
learned four-part harmony by ear. Never had any
Mm,
lyric sheets or anything like that. It was all learning by call and response with our wonderful
mm.
leader, Maggie Wheeler. And I learned so much from that. And then I now can do that too. I can lead people in song, and I have done that And sometimes I wrote some little chants for that when I was doing it. But sometimes I would just take a piece of something, like a piece of a Cat Stevens song or a piece of a line from Hamilton, actually, and just get people to repeat it. And anytime I've ever seen people singing, and particularly singing together, it is extraordinary the results I've seen of people's moods and demeanors completely changing from 1 hour of singing.
Yeah, I think choir singing is so important. But Susannah, what are the wishes and what is the big dream?
For me,
Yeah.
or the world.
For your music,
um,
for you.
oh, for me, for my music. Oh, geez. I guess, there's a part of me that gets a little nervous about saying my dreams out loud because as a young person, I was so full of dreams. I mean, again, remember, okay, I grew up in New York City. My mother was so successful. She wasn't the only one. Like, we knew people, we knew mostly writers, but we knew people who had Oscars and Tonys and Grammys on their bookshelf. And so I had many, many dreams that have not come true. And so it's a little nerve wracking. And I did write a song at one point that had to do with, if none of my dreams come true, am I still going to be okay? Am I going to be happy? Or am I only going to be happy if my dreams come true? Like, that was really a moment, in my 30s. I had to look at that. So my dream personally is to be able to touch more and more ears, whatever that means. I would love to perform in Paris in a club. I'd love to go to Vienna. I'd love to do like an international little tour. It doesn't have to be stadiums. It won't be stadiums. That doesn't make sense for me. But I really would love it if there were enough people to show up somewhere that I could book a gig there and it wouldn't cost me a bunch of money and I could fly my guys, and that would be just a dream. And I would just love to have songs reach people however they do, through TV or film or the radio or online. I don't know how, viral. There's so many different ways, but the idea of touching ears, that's my big thing. And my dream is to be healthy and well enough to also stand up and have the courage to speak up against injustice, to demand economic equality in this completely upside down world that makes no sense. There's no reason for people to be hoarding the insane amounts of wealth that they're hoarding, and there's plenty to share. And it sounds so cliche, but like, I feel very, very strongly about that being something I will speak up about, not necessarily in my songs, but I feel really passionate about it, and whatever proceeds or energies I could give to causes that are important to me, like saving our planet and taking care of people and particularly children, all those things. I would like to be able to do that.
That's wonderful. And I hope to see you in Vienna one day. And
That would be so great.
yeah, you'll have to. I've got such a big network of people that I've spoken to, musicians and singers. So maybe you find somebody to collaborate with, or maybe somebody listens to this and would love to collaborate with you. That's also a possibility.
I would love it. Reach out to me on Instagram. And also, I'm in a lucky position where I don't need to have, I mean, yeah, all good things are welcome. And, a hit song would be, that's another dream, like that, whatever that looks like, that would be so great. And I would be able, I'm really into the idea of using my musical talents for charitable causes, to raise money for things. Because I personally, I'm good. I'm doing fine. So I just need my energies to go, so I would say to you, okay, what's a cause or a charity in Vienna that you feel strongly about? Invite all of us there. We'll put on a big benefit, and that could be a fun way to gather everybody.
Oh, that's amazing. But Susannah, this was so great to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for getting up earlier.
Thanks so much, and appreciate everybody who's listening. And thank you, Petra.
It's a great pleasure.